No one expected it. At least no one believed it would actually happen. A single gunshot fired in a provincial city most people could not place on a map triggered a sequence of events that would consume an entire generation. What followed became one of the longest, bloodiest, and most catastrophic wars in human history. Millions died, civilizations fractured, empires that had existed for centuries vanished almost overnight. But the First World War did not erupt because of a single assassination. It erupted because the world had reached a point where it could no longer remain as it was. By the beginning of the 20th century, humanity had entered a dangerous imbalance. Industrial power had grown faster than political wisdom. Technology had outpaced ethics. States possessed unprecedented capacity to produce weapons, but lacked any comparable restraint in using them. Europe especially was a pressure chamber. Old empires ruled over populations they no longer truly controlled. National identities intensified, demanding borders, recognition, and revenge. Economic competition sharpened into existential rivalry. Every major power felt encircled. Every government feared decline more than war. Peace existed, but it was fragile, artificial, and performative. To maintain this fragile peace, nations bound themselves into alliances. They called them guarantees. They believed they were safeguards. In reality, they were mechanisms of automatic escalation. If one state moved, others were obligated to follow. Mobilization plans were rigid, rehearsed, and irreversible. Railway schedules mattered more than diplomacy. Once the machinery began moving, stopping it became almost impossible. Politics surrendered control to logistics. At the same time, militarism was no longer just policy, it was culture. War was romanticized. Sacrifice was glorified. Death was reframed as honor. Entire societies were taught that conflict was not failure, but destiny. Few asked what industrialized war would actually mean. They imagined banners and parades. They did not imagine trenches filled with corpses, gas choking the air, or artillery pulverizing entire landscapes into mud and bone. When the assassination occurred, it felt manageable. Another crisis, another diplomatic test. But the system was already unstable. Ultimatums were issued, intentionally impossible to accept. Mobilizations began, deliberately provocative. Declarations followed, almost mechanically. No single leader truly controlled what happened next. Each step narrowed the remaining options until only war remained. The spark did not cause the explosion. It merely revealed how much explosive material had already accumulated. Some did see it coming. Writers warned of a civilization sleepwalking toward disaster. Economists spoke of unsustainable imperial competition. Observers described Europe as armed to the teeth, staring at its own reflection in fear. But warning a system does not change a system. Too many institutions depended on expansion. Too many elites benefited from confrontation. Too many populations were conditioned to accept violence as inevitable. Correction would have required restraint, and restraint was no longer rewarded. What followed was not heroic. It was mechanical slaughter. Industrial production turned human lives into expendable resources. Entire cities were consumed to feed distant front lines. A generation learned that survival depended not on bravery, but on luck. The war did not purify societies, it emptied them. When the fighting finally stopped, nothing was resolved. Empires collapsed, but instability replaced them. Borders were redrawn, but resentment hardened. Peace treaties punished, humiliated, and postponed. The war ended, but the conditions that produced it remained. Worse, they intensified. The First World War was not an accident. It was a systemic failure, a moment when technological power exceeded moral capacity, when rigid alliances replaced flexible diplomacy, when fear, pride, and momentum overwhelmed reason. It was not inevitable in theory, but in practice, given the state of humanity at that moment, it was almost unavoidable. History does not always turn because of evil intentions. Sometimes it turns because systems reach a breaking point, and when they do, even the smallest event can destroy an entire world.